The
It's got to be
iPhone's better.
brain.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Wilson County Board of Education to order. Please know that the meeting is being held remotely through the Zoom video conferencing platform. The following board members are present in the boardroom: Mrs. Boyette, Mr. Breen, and myself, Dr. Fitch. The following board members are participating remotely: Mrs. Barnes, Mr. Boykin, Mr. Mercer, and Mrs. Powell. The meeting is being televised on Spectrum and Greenlight Channel 22 and live streamed through the Wilson County Schools YouTube channel. The public can also view the meeting through the links on the Wilson County Schools Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages, and the Wilson County Schools website. Based on executive orders from the governor, face coverings must be worn during the board meeting by those who are on-site participants. Now, I would ask the members of the board to please consider the adoption or approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell.
I move that we approve the agenda for the February 15th, 2021 Wilson County Board of Education meeting.
It has been moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that we approve the agenda for the February 15th, 2021 Board of Education meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please respond to the roll call. Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance to be followed by a moment of silence by Mrs. Boyette.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the
of the
flag
United States
of the
of
United States of
America
America,
and to the republic for which it
which
stands,
stands
one nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
with
justice
liberty
for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the board, we have minutes that will need to be approved. We have minutes of the January 11th, 2021 regular board meeting, January 19th, 2021 special board meeting, and February 8th, 2021 special board meeting. The chair will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyette.
I move that we approve the minutes of the January 11th. Let's see, is that a regular?
Yes.
Regular board meeting, the January 19th and February 8th special board meetings.
I'll second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Boyette, seconded by Mrs. Barnes, that we approve the minutes of January 11th, 2021 regular board meeting, January 19th, 2021 special board meeting, February 8th, 2021 special board meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Next on the agenda calls for the chairman's report. First of all, let me thank all of you for the attentiveness to all of the meetings that we have that get called outside of our special board out of our regular board meetings, and for those that are yet to come, because we have a lot of work that is still ahead of us. I thank the health department and its many partners as before for the fabulous work done with the vaccinations last week as a follow-up for those who got their second shot, for those who got their first shot. We did announce at our last meeting that on Wednesday there will be a vaccination clinic on this coming Wednesday, the 17th, at Beddingfield. I believe that was posted, the information for hours may have been posted on our county schools website. I do know that that is an appointment situation. I'm not sure if it's free flow in the afternoon, but please make sure that you check. And if you have to make phone calls to the COVID phone number, please do so. The governor and health department has indicated that, or the Dr. Mandy Cohen indicated that on the 24th of this month, we now have it so that the teachers are moving closer to the head of the line for their vaccinations, which is very important because we have our students coming back into our classroom settings. It's not just our teachers, but it's also our bus drivers, our support personnel that are very important in this whole process of inoculations or vaccinations. We know that we have our high school teachers who will be returning on the 15th. No, the high school teachers return March 22nd, but our elementary.
February 22nd, sorry.
You know, I have March on the brain.
Yeah.
February the 22nd, and our high school students are returning on March the 1st. I am hopeful that with the governor's indication that vaccinations should be available on the 24th for school personnel, I am hopeful that we can work with our health department to see that the 24th, 25th, and 26th, and any other dates prior to the 1st of March, as many of our teachers, our bus drivers, once they may have dropped the load and before they pick up their afternoon load. I certainly hope that in between we can begin to get those personnel vaccinated as quickly as possible. We don't have a known number of vaccines that will come in and what kind of schedule it will follow. But I am so very hopeful that we can take care of as many of our school personnel as practical and as possible before those high school students come in. For our elementary and middle school personnel, I hope that we will be able to get you in as quickly as possible in order for you to be able to get your vaccinations as well. It's very critical. We've heard the comments, we've read the comments. We know that there are those who are fearful still of the virus and the fact that the exposure creates a concern for the teachers and their families. And we wish you all Godspeed and the best. We thank you so very much for the continued efforts that you do for the children of Wilson County. And we will work to do our best to ensure that we do our part in making sure that you are as safe as possible in this uncertain time of pandemic. And other than that, I am now concluding my report, and I'll turn it over to the superintendent for his report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, audience members. If I could, I would like to ask that we have a moment of silence to remember Kim Vick, a payroll specialist in our finance department. She passed away on Saturday from health complications. If you would with me. Thank you. Please continue to keep Kim's family and friends and our finance department staff in your thoughts and prayers. Kim was an amazing lady and a very strong person, and she will be missed. And this has been a hard weekend, the start of the week for many folks, so thank you. Since our last board meeting, board members, our first mid-year virtual conference for staff was held, and that was on January 13th. We had over 30 quality sessions that were offered and had over 600 participants. Session categories covered topics such as instructional best practices, student engagement, and effective communication with families. And I think if anything we've learned through this pandemic and the response has been that learning from each other is important, and it's something that we've used to try and get ahead and stay ahead and share. So I want to thank all the presenters that contributed. That was extra for them, and it was nice to see our own folks be involved. And I'd also like to thank our Director of Technology, Matthew Mayo, and his team for organizing the conference, and also special thanks to our Associate Superintendent, Dr. Wilson, for her leadership, and she was even corralled into presenting the keynote address, which I know she loves being videoed to do that. The conference was a great way to kick off the second semester, and it was very successful. Dr. Fitch, you mentioned as well that when we met last Monday about the drive-through vaccine clinic that was held on Tuesday, January 19th in the parking lot at Fike. That went very well. I also wanted to say a special thank you to members of our maintenance department who assisted the health department and the other agencies with planning and executing that. We got really positive direct feedback from the state about how well ours was done from the health department standpoint and our support. The second dose clinic was last week, and it went very smoothly as well. I think they made a few changes because there was such a demand. At one point, I think the cars were stacked up on down Raleigh Road, but things went smoothly. And related to that, I also wanted to thank the health department staff that are based at our WASH clinic. They worked very hard to meet the healthcare needs of our students and staff, and that includes curbside COVID-19 testing and being a part of the vaccine clinics and making a lot of things happen. We're very fortunate to have the support and the resources that we have. It's helped things go well, and I know it'll pay off for us when the vaccines do arrive. There is another clinic scheduled for the community members who are 65 and older to receive the vaccine. That's February 17th at Bedingfield High School by appointment only. That's still a drive-through. And we are in the process of planning the clinic for our school staff. With the governor's announcement that the vaccine will be available on the 26th, we're working with the health department on all the details, and that is through their area. Again, so trying to keep everyone informed and folks filling out contact forms about the vaccine. We do have a tentative date of March 3rd, and I would ask, I mentioned to Dr. Williams earlier, if he could reach out and see if he got any further information about the time frame, because the issue is for us is just because the governor is announcing the vaccine is available, it takes the health department to gather enough vaccine for us to begin the process, and that's outside of their control as much as ours. So I asked him to kind of touch base with Ms. Teresa Ellen earlier. And Dr. Williams, did you hear anything back on that last little bit? We tried to reach out at the last minute and just get most recent info. Come on.
Yes, sir. We did have some communication. We don't have a definite number in terms of amount of vaccine. That date of March the 3rd is the date that is tentatively, but definitely the date that our health department is looking for our vaccination clinic for Wilson County Schools. We are still continuing to work on a determination of the site. We've obviously had success at working with our community and offering up Pike High School and in the drive-through model. So there are a couple other details that the health department are working out in terms of number of vaccines and scheduling of different locations or different school sites at what time they would need to come. So those logistics are being worked out now. But I'm in continuous communication with the health department, and as I receive more information, I'll be sharing it out immediately.
Okay.
May I ask if they will be utilizing in any way the WASH clinics that we have at Bedingfield and the middle school?
For the staff vaccination clinic, that will be modeled like our other mass vaccination clinics have been in Wilson County. So no, those staffs, yes ma'am, those staffs will be utilized. Yes, that's correct. So I mean, this will be another joint effort between the health department, WASH, all of our county partners that we have, as well as the school system. Our school nurses, of course, will be involved in that. We have all 3 high school ROTCs that will be assisting and volunteering with working with traffic control on the grounds of the schools. Maintenance, again, will be setting up, having everything available. So, yes, ma'am, the WASH clinic will be utilized, but my understanding is that they're looking at a one-site drive-through type model, just like the other vaccination clinics have gone for the county.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Williams, if I might, this is Bill.
Yes, ma'am.
There is a hotline that you can call the health department, and maybe some of our teachers that are 65 plus can call and make an appointment. I went in last Friday, and it's well orchestrated, and it did not take very long at all. After the shot, it's like a 15-minute wait to make sure everything's okay. But some of our teachers that are 65-year-old plus may take advantage of that and get an early vaccination.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Morris. That's a great point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And I failed to mention this before, but our WASH clinics have been doing vaccination clinics for our 65 and older staff members already. So thank you for bringing that up, and we continue to encourage them to contact our health department and our WASH centers to be able to get those done if you're 65 and older and working in our school district now. Thank you, ma'am.
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Boyette.
Is the Hunt High School, I know we haven't had an open house and all, but is the Hunt High School WASH clinic now operable? I know Forest Hills and Beddingfield have been mentioned, but are we?
They have just finished the delivery of furniture last week.
Okay.
And gotten that situated, so we're going to circle back with Miss Ellen and Miss Almquist and talk to them about the staffing piece of it, because we have waited for students to come back and everything's kind of lined up in the last little bit. But I know last week they sent me some video and pictures of finalizing the actual facility and the waiting areas as well as exam rooms. And I think Mr. Letchworth's on the call, but some of the refrigeration units and some of the equipment, I think that's there as well too. Mark, do you know that for sure yet? Come on.
Yes, that is correct. Just worked with Kim this morning, Kim Momquist, and she's relayed to me that they're looking at opening in March. And we are working with getting the refrigerator and stuff in place now.
And I know that we received the grant from the state to test. That would be very helpful with our students coming back. And so that should be up and operational.
I knew we were waiting on a few pieces of equipment and they had most everything else. I think the conversations we had at the start of this was that they were going to try and coincide their staffing for it, for the rotation to be when we come back in the building. So we should be in pretty good shape. So, and that is a great bonus to have 3 sites as well. And I know they're also serving Barton some as well too. So we've got a lot of coverage. So we're very excited. They were very happy to see stuff arrive. It actually looks really good. And I think when things settle down, we can have ribbon cutting out there much like we did before. But I think that was the only thing that was remaining, Ms. Boyette, was some of the stuff they'll need for the medicines.
Okay.
And before we leave that topic totally, I just wanted to give a shout out as well too for our ROTC units at Fike and Hunt that helped out with the vaccine clinic. They stepped up and helped with coordinating some of the traffic and the flow and did a great job. And all 3 ROTC groups from all 3 high schools will be working on the county schools vaccine clinic as well too. They did a great job. So if you see them, thank them. Going through the last few notes of topics I want to share with you, I also want to recognize some staff members who were the leaders for our STEM night that we had on February 2nd. Secondary STEM coordinator Josh Rollins, our STEM specialist Christine Mitchell, our EL coordinator Allison LeCarter, and Heron STEM coordinator Olivia Honeycutt Families were asked to pre-register for the event to get a science kit for the hands-on experiment. And when pre-registration opened, the response was actually so good that we had 60 slots fill up immediately, which is really good for anything online right now. And we decided to add some more slots, and so we had more than 100 students participate in with their families in this event. They were guided through an experiment just to see how clean their hands were. I don't recommend doing that alone at home. Again, we just thank everyone involved in organizing that event and our students and their families for their participation and enthusiasm. That's a good connection, and it's a great linkage, and it's a head start in some things we want to see happen in the schools ongoing. I wanted to give a shout out and recognize our Public Relations Department for receiving 4 awards from the North Carolina Public Relations Association meeting recently. I know Ms. Lynch and Ms. Ramirez represent our PR department and would not have included this had I not seen it, so I made them put it in the notes. But 2 of the awards were for excellence in writing, and 2 of the awards were for graphic design. So they do a really great job of highlighting and communicating what's happening in our district, and I wanted to give them props and recognize them. It is a nice recognition program that the state does for PR, and it was nice to see our county listed multiple times across that agenda. They typically have a big meeting, and they had to do things virtually this year, of course. A reminder, most of our staff is back today in the elementary and middle schools. Students come back Monday for elementary and middle. High schools and early colleges will return, staff will return next Monday to prepare for students' arrival on March 1st. Virtual Academy still remains an option for our students. And so we've publicized a lot, the schedule. Let me go through that one more time. When students return to face-to-face instruction, elementary students will return 4 days a week. Middle school students and early college students will return 2 days a week, and high school students 1 day a week. Students will participate in remote learning when they're not in the classroom, and we are looking forward to seeing students back in our buildings, and we'll continue to focus on our safety protocols and processes and communicating to our families about the things that are happening and keep our students as safe as possible. My last piece is I do think it's time for us to schedule some times for the board and administration to begin the process of developing a facility plan for our district and walking through that. We've shared the information on the various projects and costs for each of our schools and buildings, and that information has been submitted to DPI as part of their 5-year cycle. We've also submitted that to the county manager, and you've gotten those documents that show each of our buildings and the projects and the anticipated costs, but this is beyond that as well that we need to focus on. If you remember, we've had the Operations Research and Education Laboratory, ORED, from NC State come in and do a report on our school capacities and a forecast in our land use study, and look at enrollment forecast for utilization and help us begin to examine our status. And I think while these data and reports are fresh, it would make sense to begin our work to determine what we would like to achieve with our facilities and the priorities that's based on these data. Completing this process would also allow us to have some dialogue and meetings with the county commissioners and determine next steps, and that's needed as well. And I think we could approach the facility planning much like what we've done with policy meetings, because obviously I know you're heartbroken that the policy meetings are completed pretty much. I know that's spellbinding. But I think if we have a schedule and stick to it, it will allow us to prepare information and respond as we go along. And, you know, the policy meetings now can be absorbed within our existing board meetings, so we don't have to have those. And if we could go ahead and look at the scheduling of first meeting just to get started and share information and talk about a process, I would like to go ahead and schedule that today while we're together. It is hard to do that remotely. And I can prepare a tentative outline to walk through as we meet. But March 8th is set aside as a policy meeting now, and we will not need to have policy meetings. We can absorb those again. So if we could look at that time, it doesn't have to be that full amount of time, but at least to get started and get that on our calendars now, I'd appreciate that. Madam Chair, that's all I had.
All right, well, let me piggyback on your comments and indicate that our public relations staff, small as it is, they are certainly unsung heroes, heroines, and do an awful lot behind the scenes that we never ever see. So we congratulate them on their awards and the recognitions that they have been afforded by their peers through their association. And I'd like to ask each of you to join me in a round of applause for them because, as Dr. Mills has indicated, he probably would have said nothing and they would have been content
That'd been fine.
to have nothing said, but we know that they do an awful big job. So join me in giving them a round of applause for the much work that they do. Thank you, Iceland, and very much Amber for all of that work. Dr. Mills, you have asked us, and you know, I think we all smile. Mr. Boykin only got a small taste of
Policy work.
last week.
It turned his stomach.
I see it turned his stomach so much so that he's not in person with us today, and we hope he's getting to feel better. But we do policy revision as a full board, and we certainly will do facilities and utilization and land study and everything else as a board and not as a committee. So I think you're right. We already had policy on the agenda, on our calendars, because we thought we were going to be going much longer. It is appreciative that we will not be meeting for policy for a while and that we will be folding in policy revisions with our regular agendas as needed. Hopefully, we will never get again to the point where we are years behind in getting our policy manual updated. But I thank once again the board for the tremendous amount of work over this last year and a piece in getting the policies gone through. And it should now be a much easier task before this and any upcoming board, as long as we continue to fold into our regular meeting process any policy updates. But since we already had policy on the schedule, which meant that hopefully you had reserved the 8th of March for a policy meeting, we will convert that to becoming a facilities meeting. So members of the board, please mark your calendars accordingly. Is that meeting scheduled for 4 o'clock or 1 o'clock?
It's 1 o'clock.
That is scheduled for 1. I need to ask, is that going to be problematic, or can we still leave that 1 o'clock, or do we need to move that to 4 as when our meeting, our full board regular meetings are scheduled? What is your pleasure? Would you prefer 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock? I know that Mr. Breen has a working schedule, and 1 o'clock might be an interference with his court dockets and agenda and time.
I think I should be good for 1 o'clock.
Okay.
I've got it on the calendar.
Good, thank you. Mr. Boykin is a working person that we may need to. Mr. Boykin, is 1 o'clock on the 8th of March going to be a workable time for you?
1 o'clock will be fine for me.
All right. The rest of us are retired or semi-retired. I know that Mrs. Boyette has babysitting duties, but generally works around that when she has enough notice. Is that going to be fine? So still for 1 o'clock, Mrs. Boyette?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Powell, is 1 o'clock fine for you?
Yes, it's fine.
Mrs. Barnes? Mrs. Barnes, you're muted.
She thumbed up.
She gave a thumbs up.
Oh, gave a thumbs up. I'm sorry. I looked away from the screen and I did not see it. My apologies. Thank you. And Mr. Mercer, is 1 o'clock okay for you?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So on March the 8th, we will be meeting for facilities Information and Planning. So thank you so very much. Next on the agenda, calls for public input. We did not have anyone to sign up to speak or who had sent in notice or letter since we are still in this confined space time at this point in time. Therefore, we will move to item 7, discussion, information, action items. Under information, we have 2 items. The first being opportunity culture, and the second being an update on the new Wilson Academy of Applied Technology building. So, Dr. Wilson, I assume that that's you with the opportunity culture, or is that going to be Dr. Mills, or that's going to be you? All right, then Dr. Wilson, I will turn this over to you, and I'll let you get us started, please.
Good afternoon. Today, we'd like to update with our progress towards the North Carolina Teacher Compensation Models and Advancement Teaching Roles Grant that we received recently. We have Kendall King online with us from Public Impact, and she is leading us through the Opportunity Culture Grant.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. King. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
We also have Mr. Linden, Ms. Lewis, and Mr. Mayo, who will also be participating in this presentation.
All right, thank you.
Our purpose today is to give you an overview because we anticipate quite a bit of interest from Wilson County Schools educators as well as educators outside of Wilson County. So you have your, okay.
Now, when you say our Wilson County Schools employees, but you then added and other employees outside of Wilson County, as the outside Wilson County persons, are they observers? Are they participating with our personnel? Or please give us an explanation.
There will be some jobs that will be offered or positions
Okay.
as a part of this grant, and we anticipate that there will be educators within Wilson County interested in these positions, as well as those outside of Wilson.
Okay, so it's for the job opportunities.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
And just to clarify that, you mean job opportunities that they would move to become a Wilson County employee?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, a recruitment tool.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes,
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. Are we good, Dr. Mills?
yeah, I'm pulling up the document now. I had it on my, I had the abbreviated agenda, not the complete agenda,
Okay.
so I'm pulling it up.
In your packet, there were 2 pages at the beginning, and those 2 pages would be typically a front and back, and that would be like a highlights page of what the presentation is about. It's kind of like a quick run through it. And then behind those 2 pages, you will see the presentation, and that's what Dr. Mills is ready to put up at this time.
Thank you.
As soon as it arrives, hold on.
I mean, highlights are good. You can't undersell
Did you
highlights.
send it, Lynn?
They are literally the
It's lower.
highlight of the presentation.
So while he's pulling that up, and on the highlights page,
Okay.
when you gave the dates, the chart with the dates,
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
are these for this year, or we actually began last year?
We have started, this is the year that is our planning year. So when you
Okay.
see September the
Thanks, Lynn.
28th, this was this past September the 28th. It's a 3-year grant. The first year is required for planning, and the
Okay.
last 2 years are for implementation.
Because I wasn't sure if it was moving like for this coming September, but then as I read through the packet, I'm going with
I
their
understand.
dates that are here. So was this really
Okay.
a last year, a 2021, or is this a 21-22
I
planning year?
understand.
So 2021 is actually our planning year.
Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
that's correct. If you'll scroll down to page 2 of the presentation. One more.
One more?
Go ahead.
It's
All right,
in,
that's page 1 of the
it's in a
presentation.
different
All
viewer. I
right,
can't
there you
control
go,
it.
that's page 2.
I'm gonna get it out.
So,
Okay.
on this page, talks about the common challenges, and because of the challenges that you see listed there, whoops.
Never mind,
Yeah,
trying to,
that's okay.
trying to fix it while we were going.
Okay. You look at the diagram, and the diagram is basically as of a school. So the P is for the principal, and all the T's are the teachers. And so, of course, the common challenge is out of the course of a year, we have teachers who are leaving. And all the list of the bullets on the right would be the reasons as to why they might be leaving. Next. I'm gonna go through this quickly, Dr. Mills, hopefully.
No, Mr. Breen will be very happy.
Yeah. So this particular slide shows about the opportunities through opportunity culture. You have the P as in the principal, and you have teachers, typically would be that T would take care of 25 kids, 25 students typically. However, that T stands for, that's in the blue, would be the leader within that team. So there would be 100 students, example, and these are all hypothetical numbers. It could be 75, it could be 90. We're just using the number 100. And so between the three teachers and the TA would take care of those students. Where the teachers in the blue would be considered the lead teachers. Where they lead teachers in their team, they support their colleagues, and they're able to reach all of the students, which is a little bit different than what we are currently working in a coachable model. Whereas that teachers coach other teachers, but in this particular model is where they also are teaching students along the way. Next slide.
Can you tell me TA? That's the teacher assistant,
That
as
would be-
we already know it. So it's actually 3 teachers and a teacher assistant in that, I'll say for lack of another word, pod of 100 students.
Could be. Each
Okay.
school has a decision on how they would like to model that, and each school may decide something very different.
Okay.
We'll go into an example of that. On this slide, it just shows that this grant is aligned to our strategic plan, and you see 4 of the key strategies from our Wilson County Schools strategic plan. We're not going off the beaten path and doing something way out there. We are aligning the work that we're doing to our strategic plan. And on the next slide, Kendall is going to share information.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here today.
Thank you.
On this slide, you can see 5 opportunity culture principles. That's true of every school and district that chooses to embark in this journey and this initiative. So the first one is that all schools reach more students with excellent teaching and teams. Our hope, the main goal, is that all students have an equitable access to education and that excellent teachers can get in front of more students, either through leadership or through other avenues. But then we don't want them to just take on more work. We want to pay them for actually taking on that work. So that's the second principle here, is to pay teachers more for extending their reach to more students. The third principle is all about sustainability. How we don't want to just start an initiative and that runs out as soon as the grant runs out. So this is an example of how we want to pay teachers within regular budgets. And we'll show some examples of how schools are able to do that later, but it puts a lot of autonomy in the school's hands to use some creative strategies to fund it within regular budgets instead of relying on temporary funding. The fourth principle you see on the screen is providing in-school protected time for planning, for collaboration, and for development to really get good at these teacher leader roles. We know time and time again that we can't just start an initiative if there's not time in the schedule to truly have it and do it and plan it. So we work with schools pretty intensively on their schedules to work with that. The fifth one on here is how do you match authority and accountability to all of these roles? So if someone is now responsible for more students, but they're leading 5 teachers, how do we make sure at the end of the day that they're getting results and that student outcomes are improving? That's kind of the goal of that fifth one. So we mesh all of these principles together, and all opportunity culture schools across the nation adhere to those 5 principles. You can turn to the next slide. I mentioned that there's many opportunity culture schools. We are a national initiative and we're growing every year. You can see here on the screen that we're in several states across the country, and in some of those states, many different districts. So we have lots of clusters within North Carolina, both in Charlotte-Mecklenburg and Guilford County, and also some more rural districts. We also have a lot of clusters in Texas. We have some exciting work there. And you can see other initiatives across the nation, ranging from rural to really urban ones like Chicago Public. The next slide will show in the examples of which districts we're working with currently in North Carolina. So you can see Cabarrus County and Charlotte-Mecklenburg were some of our earlier ones. But then there's several others on the list, many of whom are advanced role grantees, just like Wilson County. If you'd like to dig into any of those districts, many of them have their own opportunity culture websites. You can actually look at those examples on the screen and see what they're doing with their initiatives.
And
I'll turn it back to you. Oh, go ahead.
We are currently in the process of creating our own opportunity culture website as well. On the next slide shows the 3 different types of roles that would be in opportunity culture. The multi-classroom leader, Mr. Linden will share some information about that. Ms. Lewis will share information about the Team Reach teacher and Master Team Reach teacher. And Mr. Mayo will share about the Reach associate.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. So as Dr. Wilson shared, there are 3 roles identified through opportunity culture. And the first of these that we'll discuss is the multi-classroom leader. This is a very strong teacher, one who's had a record of high growth in the classroom, high success rates in the classroom. That teacher, through opportunity culture, will lead small groups of teachers in lesson planning, data analysis, improving instructional strategies, and may observe and give feedback to the teachers on their team. Depending on the model that the school selects, the multi-classroom leader may be a full release or a partial release. And if you hear those terms, it basically aligns to how many of the classes that they will have assigned to them full-time, as opposed to have an extra release period that provides them more opportunities to help those teachers that they are working with. Next slide, please. So when we first look at the multi-classroom leader, it sounds a whole lot like the coaches and facilitators that we've got in place. So we've created this Venn diagram, or this Venn diagram was created to show the difference between the two. And while both are excellent teachers and their role is to observe and support teachers, there are some differences with them. On the facilitator or coach side, our coaches are stretched because they try to serve every teacher in the school. Whereas in the multi-classroom leader, they're going to be serving a smaller team of teachers. So it's going to be a defined and limited number of teachers that they're going to be able to work with. They're also going to be teaching students directly. And because of that, there's going to be a level of accountability. They're not simply going to be the gurus of knowledge. They're going to be demonstrating what it is that they are teaching to their peers. And so that's going to build capacity in our buildings. And that's also going to provide a sense of ownership for these people, that they are showing what they know and they're demonstrating that. Next slide. And this is some data from a study that was conducted of 15,000 students over 2 to 3 years. They had 300 teachers in 3 districts, and 74% of the schools that were in this study were Title I. So you can see it on the left-hand side, the baseline score in terms of gains in the classrooms prior to opportunity culture were at about mid-range, 50th percentile. But by the time the studies were completed, those results had grown significantly. In reading, between 66th and 72nd were the gains, and then for math, 75th to 85th were the gains there.
In only 2 to 3 years, wow.
Yes, ma'am.
You can go ahead to the next slide. Good afternoon. I'm glad to be here. I'm very excited about opportunity culture and what it can mean for our schools. I'm going to share a little bit about the Team Reach teacher and the Master Team Reach teacher. A Team Reach teacher would be on a team with what they call an MCL, which is what David was just speaking about, the multi-classroom leader. And if they are a Team Reach teacher, that MCL, depending if they have a partial release or a full release, that classroom position, those students may need to be divided up among other classrooms. And if those classrooms have more students than the state average, which we can get a waiver for this through opportunity culture. So for example, if you can only have 20 students in third grade and each of the third grade classes has 25, they could be paid this additional bonus because they're reaching more students. So that's our Team Reach teacher. It's a teacher that's doing more with more students. And of course, we want our best teachers in that area. However, they are going to still be led by an MCL, which is going to be one of our best. The Master Team Reach teacher would also have a high growth track record with students, and they would reach even more students than just say 4 or 5 more, but they would also be involved with coaching other students on their team as well. So there's 2 more opportunities for some bonus and for teachers to be sharing their knowledge and helping others, and at the same time reaching more students as they're doing so, because we do want to put our best teachers in front of more students.
Good evening, everyone. And saving the best for last, because we always know that behind every good teacher is a good teacher assistant. And that kind of brings us to our Reach Associate, which is an elevated teacher assistant position that will assist with the instruction and take responsibility for the non-instructional duties of 1 or more teachers as well. And basically the Reach Associate assists with and facilitates large groups and small group student learning, sometimes with technology, sometimes without technology, that will focus on that personalized and blended learning models that we still continue to strive for. The Reach Associate also manages procedures and supervises the student behavior, of course, during the transition, lunch, recess, assemblies, and so forth. But they work really closely with the teachers to coordinate various instructional duties to make sure the kids are getting exactly their personalized needs met.
This next slide that you have before you talks about the bonuses or the stipends that we have considered for our different positions. We've had several meetings with the team from Public Impact. We meet twice a month as well as district team meetings, and we've also had some school meetings as well. And through those meetings, we've been able to determine that there would be a core stipend. And let's just start with the multi-classroom leader 1. That will be the one that I'll give an example for. That particular position would have a $7,000 stipend, and if that particular person taught in a Tier 1, which would be the highest level of poverty Title I school, that would be an additional $6,000. So when you add those 2 figures together, that a multi-classroom leader 1 could possibly have an additional $13,000 for the year. That money, the core stipend, would come from the allocation of a state allotment. So if there are, say, 18 teachers in a building, the principal and the leadership team have decided to cut one of those positions, those state 01 positions, and then they would take the money from that position and then it would be reallocated out for the stipends. And certainly this is not a one-person decision. This is a principal and a school leadership team meeting. And they have been working together over the past several months to decide which of these models and the roles that would fit the best for their schools. We have anticipated that this is going to be a multi-year rollout and to go slow. So they may have like a multi-classroom leader 1 this year, and then next year they may add some additional positions along the way.
If you go to the next slide, you can see more about how Dr. Wilson was explaining to pay for these positions. So the first thing on the slide, that first big bucket, is classroom vacancies. That's what Dr. Wilson was mentioning about trading or exchanging in one of those O1 allotments to repurpose those funds in a different way. Other ways that schools can pay for these sustainably or could be reallocating current money, especially Title I money. We consider that sustainable funding since it's more or less the same every year and continuing on. And so they could repurpose their title funds and spend towards opportunity culture stipends or roles. Another option, which can overlap with title money, is specialists. So if they have a coach or an interventionist or another position like that in their building, it could be paid through title funds or other allotments. They could trade in or repurpose those positions for opportunity culture ones. So those are 3 ways that schools can flexibly together figure out how they might pay for these positions sustainably without relying on a grant. On the next slide, you can see an example of how this might look. So Dr. Wilson mentioned it could be a year, a phasing out over the years or phasing in. So in this sample, I think it says Barnes, but this is a complete example. This isn't what they're actually doing yet. They're in the process of determining their plan, but this is a sample that you could picture. So you could imagine that potentially a school may prioritize that they want to focus on K2. And so in this example, you can see that there's 2 multi-classroom leader teams, one that's on the smaller end for 2nd grade. On that team, you have a partial release MCL, which David alluded to earlier. So here you would have an MCL who is a teacher of record for 2nd grade. That means he or she has her own classroom of students, and then is also going to support those other 2 2nd grade teachers that you see within that red box. Now, in order to have time for the MCL to support the teachers, the MCL is paired with the Reach Associate, which you see in that gray box right next to the MCL. And that Reach Associate is able to continue the learning in the classroom while the MCL steps away for short periods of time to observe and debrief and work with her fellow teachers. The other team you see below that in the red box is a larger team. It's a K1 team. And here the MCL may be a full release MCL because the team is much larger. Although they're not a classroom of record or teacher of record, they're still teaching by pushing into classrooms, modeling lessons, working with small groups, etc. And the way they funded for these positions in this sample, is that they've essentially hired in a 2nd grade teacher. They've repurposed the to become an MCL, and they could repurpose the way they're using TAs or coaches positions to help fund some stipends and other things in the building.
So far, we have set up and met several times to come up with our district selection process. So this is just an overview. I believe it's next week, February 24th, we're going to be having a session where all teachers in the district that are interested or want to learn more about these positions can come and hear about it. And then at the very end of the month, candidates will be able to submit their initial applications with their resume, and they do need to provide some data showing that they have a good, strong track record with student achievement and some of their own evaluation data. So once we get those initial applications in, we will, around March 12th, be doing, the district will review the applications and screen to see if they meet the qualifications. And then between March 22nd and April 16th, the district team will be conducting BEIs, which are called behavioral event interviews with the invited candidates. And we will be getting trained on February 22nd about the behavioral event interviews, and a lot of it is about interviewing and what to look at based on the competencies that Wilson County feels are the strongest competencies we need to look for as we're recruiting. So we will begin that interview process with the behavioral event interviews and score the candidates based on those competency rubrics. Once we have done that and all the scores on the rubrics have been tallied up, we will open it to principals. They can receive the candidate rankings, those interview scores, and then the candidates would be invited to a school level interview with the principals on April 19th. So we're hoping to get these positions staffed before the end of this school year, so we'll be ready to go for next year.
So the next part of the course is trying to figure out what is the selection criteria for the OC roles that we have here in Wilson. I think one of the cool things about this is knowing that these, the selection criteria here is tailored to meet the needs of Wilson County schools. And of course, we have the district level support team as well in moving through these pieces of it as well. So the first piece we have is the critical competencies here, where the BEI interview, of course, would be taking place here. We have essay questions to kind of get a feel for their teaching style, their coaching style, as well as their leadership abilities. Then we look at their beliefs and cultures, again, going back to the BEI and the essay questions, and also recommendations. We're also looking at student performance. What was the EVOS data over the past couple of years? And also looking at self-submission and narrative explaining some of the student impact that's happened in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And of course, the last thing there is the qualitative classroom data as far as the teacher evaluations that have been completed over the course of the last few years, their resume, and recommendations as well.
So as Dr. Wilson shared earlier, we met and meet quite frequently with the Opportunity Culture support. In addition to our meetings every other week, we have our district design team meetings, and you can see on the right-hand side of this chart the stakeholders at the district level who are attending these meetings. We've had a couple of meetings at this point. And we've got 3 more scheduled throughout the course of this year, and you can see what those topics are. But the information and the discussions are very pointed. I mean, we know exactly what our tasks are going into those meetings, and we've got the stakeholders involved in those meetings to make sure that the product of those meetings is beneficial to what we're trying to do.
On our next slide, it talks about the school selection process. Our schools were able to opt in for the 2021 school year for the planning. We know that after we go through this process, we may have some additional schools for the following school year, but they were, we worked with them on an opportunity culture orientation back in September. We had a meet and greet with principals who are currently in opportunity culture. They had to submit a survey, and then we also had a kickoff in December. And finally, we came down to 10 different schools in Wilson County schools.
And we have 8 elementary schools and 2 middle schools that have volunteered for a total of 10 schools, and we're just real excited about these schools. They voluntarily opted in and are working very hard to create what's going to be in the best needs of their schools to help show some student growth. That's what we're all about. So you can see the list of the schools that have opted in this first year.
And then once a school has elected to participate in opportunity culture, we started scheduling the school design meetings, and we had one in January once they accept it. We've got another one scheduled, I believe, for tomorrow. And these meetings are just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. It is an opportunity for them to look at the variables that might work within their schedule, and to also solicit feedback from school leaders who may have done opportunity culture in the past. We've had opportunities for our principals to have chats with principals from other districts who have done this to sort of see how it fits together in essence.
And so the last slide is the opportunity, if you would like to ask some questions. I'd like to just say that we have had a wonderful past year of meetings with the team from Public Impact, and could not have asked for a more professional team. They are extremely thorough, and I know that our team could not have made it to the point to where we are in this planning year without their support. And so thank you to Kendall. Ashley was unable to be online with us today and her team, and we're very thankful for that. This grant is about building the capacity of our teachers, growing our own teachers, building the capacity. We have many teachers who want to be leaders, but not necessarily in administration. And this is an opportunity for them to become leaders in their profession and not ever have to leave a classroom.
All right, well, thank you so much for the presentation. I don't know about my fellow board members, but I certainly do have a few questions that I will ask. I'm grateful that we have this opportunity to develop this and to see that it's a national program that can have impact. And since we are so very concerned with raising our student performance, that this becomes another avenue that we may explore. My first question, because you may start with a cadre of teachers that become oriented and trained in this process, is there a plan, and how do you plan to address when teachers leave and new teachers come into, and do they get an introduction and orientation and not just get plunked down into a classroom that is already functioning and utilizing this particular model? That's the first question.
Okay, ready for me to answer that?
Ready?
So on our last meeting, we actually had that question come up about what our professional development will look like, and we will begin this summer on that. And certainly for those teachers who are interested in one of the multi-classroom leader positions, or the REACH teacher or the REACH associate, they will be trained. And then thereafter, we will have to have a continuous cycle of that professional development. It cannot be a one and done, because we do know that there will be turnover.
Yes. Will the OC website be a standalone, or is there going to be a link and a connectivity to our system website?
Yeah, Mr. Mayo has created that website, and he could probably share a little bit more information about that, because he has designed it.
Okay. Mr. Mayo?
Yes, we have not decided on the actual domain that it will be, but it will be separate from the Wilson Schools NC website, but it will be linked directly to our district page. And in talking with Opportunity Culture and looking at other school districts, most of them kind of did a different branding approach to kind of draw attention, as this is a separate program.
Is there not value in having it directly linked with our page, if you're using this as a recruitment tool, so that persons can see that this is a national program and all of the other things surrounding this particular program? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Yes, it will be directly linked to our website, our Wilson Schools main webpage.
Okay, so It is standalone, but yet it is linked to our webpage.
Yes, ma'am. It'll still be on our HR webpage.
Okay. The next question in regard to slide 18. Who's going to be doing the BEI, the behavioral interviews? And you talked about the use of teacher evaluations. Are not those teacher evaluations confidential? I mean, so is it administrators? Is it other teachers conducting these interviews? And so I'm concerned about the access to the teachers' ongoing evaluations that some may be accepting of and some may not be quite as happy with.
Kendall could probably speak to you a little bit more about the specifics in the BEI type training. I know that we're going to be trained on Monday for that type of interview. I really don't have any kind of additional information about that, so Kendall might have some additional information.
All right, Kendall?
Sure. The behavioral event interview is designed to be a team-based interview process. So usually the team is included of people on the district level as well as potentially some school administrators. But that's pretty much it to keep it confidential. And it's an interview technically where they talk about past experiences and evaluate based on competencies instead of qualifications on a resume, for example, or asking hypothetical questions. So we're getting trained on that next week.
So if a teacher does not want their individual evaluation information shared with the others, do they get to opt out of having their evaluations available, or is that a necessary component of that interview?
I would consider that a necessary component of the interview. It's a part of one of our selection criteria. Not only their student performance, but their performance. They would need to share that.
Okay.
It'd be part of their packet.
So we're going to be upfront with them and letting them know that their individual evaluation forms would be shared within the process.
Yeah, they would need to be upfront about their own.
Okay. Can all schools, not just Title I schools, eventually use this model?
Yes, we designed it that way because we're using the core stipend would be from the state 01 positions.
Okay.
It's just that the Title I schools would be able to add additional funding on top of it. There are some models, as Kendall and Ashley has shared with us in the past, that are non-Title I. So
Okay.
they just would not receive that column that talked about Title I stipends.
Okay. And in slide 3, where you showed the diagrams of the classrooms, I think it was 4 classrooms, it was 100 students, it was 3 teachers and a teacher assistant. So all 3 teachers in the classroom, along with that teacher assistant, will have gone through the training for this particular model.
They would have, yes.
And so some would be, the teacher assistant would be that RA. One teacher would become the lead teacher or the MCL, and the others still would have had the training in the concepts and the principles of this particular model.
Right.
Okay. Other board members, do you have questions?
I have a question.
Mrs. Barnes?
Yes, Dr. Wilson, do you have to be a member of the cohort in order to apply for some of the positions? I know you said you would possibly hire people from without. Say if I was a teacher at New Hope and I found out, or they're gonna know about the program, could I opt to go to another school maybe and work if I'm interested in being part of the cohort, or do they have to be a member of the staff at that particular school?
No, ma'am, they do not have to be a member of that staff at that school. They could be at another school in Wilson County. We actually talked with our principals at a recent principals meeting, I think it was a couple weeks ago, reminding them about this opportunity, shared a little bit with them about that they could possibly have some teacher turnover because they have teachers who might be interested in this opportunity.
At the end of the 3 years, do they have an opportunity to go back to the schools that maybe they came from?
This is really, it's not, I want us to think about this, that it is a 3-year grant. That's a very good question. Thank you, Ms. Barnes, because I don't want that as a misunderstanding. This is a 3-year grant. This first year is paid for our planning. So we are strictly doing the planning and the professional development. That's the funding source for it. The next 2 years of that grant will pay for the stipends to help us. But at the end of that 3rd year, that's why this sustainability plan is necessary. This is very, very different than what we have done in the past, say with some of our SIG schools, where we had offered money and stipends to go and teach for a school during that time period of SIG. It was very important that the figures that we put down, whether it's $7,000, $6,000, $1,400, is that this amount of money could be sustainable 5 years, 10 years down the road. Now, it could change in the fact that if a school decided that based on their performance, they did not need to have support in a K2 math, they needed more support in the 3-5 math, then I do think that it could change and the needs of the school might change it, but it would not be because of the funding that was allowed.
Okay. One last comment, I was glad to see that our lower performing schools opted in to be a part of the cohort. That was important to me.
Okay. Mrs. Boyette?
Yes, is there additional stipend for the, I'm looking at slide 13, for the reach associate, teacher assistant or teacher resident, the advanced paraprofessional, would they be receiving a stipend?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
On slide 14.
Okay, I see.
Mm-hmm. It's
all right.
yes, ma'am. It's $1,000, and then if they were in one of the tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 schools, it would be an additional amount of money. That's over the course of the year.
And that would be perfect for someone that was in a program, a teacher assistant currently and wanting to move into a teaching position.
That would be.
Be a good segue, good
Yes.
preparation.
Other board members have questions? Well, I certainly thank you for this presentation. This is yet another avenue that is presented to us for opportunity to increase our student performance, to be able to reach more students. We always talk about how persons may want to stay at a school that has a good performance and may not always want to be reassigned. So this is another way of making sure that some of our best and brightest are working with students who have that need for that extra amount of reinforcement of learning opportunities. So we thank you all so very much for that. We look forward to getting updates on how this is going and to see what our interest area happens to be among all of our teachers as we move forward with this opportunity. So thank you very much. I'll ask one more time if members of the board have any further questions in regard to the Opportunity Culture Program. This is an informational item, and so we thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, Kendall, and we look forward to your participation with us in the future as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next on the agenda, members of the board, another informational item is the update on the new Wilson Academy of Applied Technology building, WAT. So, Dr. Mills, I'm going to turn this over to you, and we'll go in the direction that you lead us at this point.
Madam Chair, board members and audience members, we have folks on from our architectural firm, as well as our construction management firm, Skinner, Farlow, and Kerwin, as well as Barnhill Construction and Contractors for a construction management piece. And so you'll see Alicia, Brad, and Ben, and then John Smith, and let's see, there's one more at least. Let me pull up my screen. I've got my sharing almost ready to turn on here. Let me get back to this, and I see, I think it's Joey Wilkins, and let's see, Connor, let me look. Who else am I missing? Let's see.
I think that's it.
That's it. And then we've also got Ms. Cox has joined us. Mr. Letchworth is on the call as well. So what we've asked today is the folks from our architectural and construction management firms to give the board our first kind of overview of the Watt project. We're very excited about where we are. We've been meeting and going through the design piece and the preparation piece. And so this is the first time that you'll see some of the pictures that are pretty close to being what things may actually look like. And they've taken some changes over time, so we didn't want to spoil the fun until we got a little bit closer. So I'm going to share the screen and then let these folks walk you through. We've got a little bit of a timeline in there, as well as some pictures for you. And I just really wanted this to be an opportunity for you to kind of see where we are, put the time frame in your brain so you'll kind of know what to expect, and really just ask some questions if you wanted. And it's nice to see this project at this point, because it is really becoming concrete, and I think that's really exciting for our school system and our community. So with that, I'm going to switch over and share and turn it over to any of them to lead us through, and I'll do the job of managing the screen here.
Thank you, Dr. Mills. I'm Brad Farlow with Skinner Farlow Kerwin Architecture. Alicia will be doing some of the presentation, and also John from Barnhill also. So thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. We're very, very pleased to be here to talk about the Wilson Academy of Applied Technology and where it stands currently. Next slide, please. In the design, we've really enjoyed working with the principal and other members of the team. So currently, I'll just give you a brief overview. Currently, the building is 82,800 square feet. It's a two-story building. As you all know, it's on the site of Wilson Community College. Shared, some of the parking lot is shared with the two buildings that are going to remain at Wilson Community College, and then the third one that they're going to be building soon. Currently, we're showing 43 spaces in front of the building and 112 in the rear parking lot, and we'll look at a drawing of this in just a minute. The bus loops at the rear of the building, where 6 buses can unload at one time, and then I'll show you also where the cars drop off and where the visitors enter. Our schedule, and as Dr. Mills said, we're working very hard on it currently, and our next submittal is 60% construction documents in 1 month, and then after that, and further review by the CM and the owner, finishing the construction documents on May 14th. So we're on track and on schedule for that. I'll let John from Barnhill give you a little summary of what they're working on currently.
Hey, so good afternoon. I'm John Smith. I'm Vice President at Barnhill Contracting Company. Just wanted to give a brief overview of what our team's doing behind the scenes to prepare the project for construction. So regarding the hub outreach, we just held that today, actually, 11 o'clock today. The entire purpose of this meeting was to promote the job and to encourage minority and local participation on the project. This is important to our team, and we know it's important to the school system as well. We have the project out now for subcontract pre-qualification. We have so far received a good number of pre-qualifications, which gives us signs that the market is excited about the project. With regard to site prep, our team's been evaluating the site to ensure it's ready for construction when we mobilize to the site. We met with the designers, the facility staff, as well as the community college to talk through logistics and ensuring we're coordinating our work. There are existing utilities, for example, that have to be relocated, and we're working through that now. And regarding the budget, our team is working closely with the design team to get the project within budget. We understand that is important. We're estimating the job during each design deliverable and offering ideas along the way to modify the design as needed to get to the budget. We're watching the trends with current pricing as well as how COVID has impacted the market.
Has COVID impacted the market positively for us or negatively for us?
Well, it kind of goes both ways. So it's what we're seeing on our side is, subs are trying to secure backlogs. So what we're seeing is more participation on bid day. We're seeing some of the prices go low on one side of the spectrum, but we're also on the other side, we're seeing steel increases and other material increases that are hurting us in some ways, and then we're seeing some product delays when you get into construction. So overall, it's kind of going a little bit both ways as far as COVID concerned.
Do they even themselves out?
Well, we're hoping so. So we've got, and the team here knows, we've got several projects that are coming out to bid here shortly. So we have one next week, and then we have another one in about 4 weeks. So we'll be able to tell what's going on once we get through a couple more bids on projects. We're still hoping for it.
You can switch to the next slide, please.
Okay.
So this is a view of the existing site at the Lee campus. As you can see, there's a Ward Boulevard is on the lower going, yeah, right there. Sorry, I can't point to anything, but the existing buildings that have been renovated are on the left and the right of our site. Our site's sort of in the middle between those two buildings. And then also the Wilson Community College is looking at replacing the buildings that are to the upper right corner of the site. So there's a design team looking at doing that currently also. So we're in coordination with them as well. Next slide, please. And then this shows the overall site with the Watt project in the center, the largest building, obviously. The lower, along Ward Boulevard is the main entrance to the building. So if you were a visitor or coming for the first time, you would park right there in front and come in the main door, which is right in the center of the, right exactly there. If you were a bus rider, you can see that you would come in on there are buses in the back and would let off in that location. Both sides have easy access to the cafeteria, so if you're waiting on a class to start, there's a good place to wait for that. And then car riders would be dropped off along the right side of the building. And in addition to that, there's an entrance at that point for the gymnasium so that it can be used after hours. And I'm gonna let Alicia talk about the floor plan, which I think is coming up next on the next slide. Oh, this is actually, I guess I got a little ahead of myself. This is a 3D view of the site that we just looked at. So you can see that it's basically a 2-story building. It is a very compact building, you know, on a site that doesn't allow it to spread out a lot, which is why it's 2-story. And also it's why we've got daylighting in the center of the building that you see popping up in the roof there, so that we can get natural light all through the building, not just on the edges. Next slide, please. Got one more. So this is the Heron Sutton plan, which is a lot more technical than the one you saw before, but it shows where the new pavement is, which is the dark gray area, and the bus drop off in the back of the school, and also the utilities. So they're working very hard and have made a lot of progress on this part of the project, because the site often takes the longest to get approvals on. So they're making good progress on that. So next slide.
Hi, I'm Alicia Kerwin with Skinner Furlow Kerwin Architecture. And so we're just going to briefly go over the plans we've highlighted here, just kind of the main points of the plan. Brad already kind of highlighted the fact that the folks come in on the south side there, or south per this screen, the main entrance. The bus rider entrance is, of course, in the back, and then the carpool entrance on the side, along with the community gym entrance. One of the main drivers of how the floor plan's arranged is not only circulation on the site, but also providing the opportunity for Wilson County Public Schools, along with their partner in this, Wilson Community College, to provide a facility for the county that not only really is a wonderful asset for the schools, but also for the community and for Wilson County Schools and their other sites, in terms of being able to have a facility that could potentially be open at other times for other events. So you'll notice that that community gym entrance, if another school or the community college would like to use the gym, the rest of the school is secure and can be secured from that use. We have appropriate restroom facilities for the gym for that. So the plan's basically 4 quadrants. So that quadrant could be used for that use and no other. The school would be secure from that. Additionally, that back purple area is where all of the early college programs are focused, along with the industrial program they have, because it's close to the outside. This too can also be secured from the rest of the school, and it has its own restroom facilities. So if there were evening classes or classes that are offered at another time of the day that either the community college or the high school felt was advantageous to the community, that could be handled in that area without affecting the rest of the building, keep it secure. And then Dr. Mills, if you wouldn't mind zooming down in the bottom, sure. We have a professional development room that, of course, Crystal and her staff can use for professional development, but also it has its own little entrance there and exit, the purple room. It's a little bit smaller. But if there were other events that perhaps you wanted to hold after hours, or even before hours on a Saturday, you could open the school up to just this little piece if you wanted to, and kind of keep folks in that area. Let's say you want to meet and greet with parents before a school semester starts. They're not having to go into the depths of the school. So those are 4 considerations we made in planning the piece. Then Brad had mentioned daylighting. The central part of the plan is what we'll call a collaboration commons, their area where they can eat, their cafeteria, a place where they could have small presentations. The stairs are designed with 2 platforms, so if someone could stand and give out awards, or perhaps you were having some speeches or debate, you could facilitate that and have that within the school in that location. It really provides Crystal and her staff with some flexibility in being able to get the community gathered together in a space. And then the green area, just to the right of that, is our technology center. So that's a place where you can read. There will be support there for any literature that supports the school there, as well as a really heavily, supported technology center. So 3D printers and plotters and all the things that she needs to really help support a really strong STEM lab, as well as a computer center, and with the flexibility to go in between those. So those can be used both for teaching and also to support students and staff in exploring, new learning techniques and ways of teaching. I want to go on to the second floor plan. Next slide. So the second floor is basically what's focused on our high school classrooms. Let's make it a little smaller. Yeah. Down in the bottom left-hand corner are our science labs. We have what we call kind of a traditional chemistry lab and a biology lab, both with the flexibility to have labs in the classroom, as well as we've made sure that we can have different furniture configurations for flexible learning and teaching styles. And then the robotics lab and the general science lab, you'll see with the circular kind of configuration of seats, really providing opportunity for some flexible learning there in the robotics lab. The rest are classrooms as the principal would like them to be designated. And all of these classrooms have daylight into them. So it's a big priority for us. And then the green areas are collaborative spaces. So we know there are always students or groups that are working on things together, or a student or two who might need some time to work on something or some attention from a TA, or need to be pulled out of a class for some special attention. These provide those kind of areas where you can either be, pulled out of class or go out with a team and kind of work on a project together. So it provides them that kind of learning opportunity, a peer-to-peer learning, and also student-teacher relationships. And the next slide. So these are just some renderings of where we are with the project. Really trying to use materials that are very familiar to the campus and to North Carolina, so, and a language that's familiar. So we've got brick as the majority of the building, some metal panels. This is a technology high school, and so we wanted to bring that in for two reasons. One, it can be less expensive not to have to support brick in some areas, as well as just kind of the idea of a technology classroom, that language to speak to the school. And using a color scheme that is works well with the existing buildings that are out there for the Wilson Community College. Next slide. This is my favorite. It'll look really great in the evenings as well. So it's a really nice, vibrant building on Ward Boulevard. Really, really nice there.
I like water on top.
Yeah. And then if you can go to the next slide, Dr. Mills. I don't know how long we want to stay on this. So then we just have generated some interior perspectives. Of course, as Brad and John have alluded to, we're still working on the project. But this is looking into that open cafeteria collaborative space. Trying to create a space that is suitable, for the observation of students, making sure everybody's got good visual sight in a high school, but also understanding that we're preparing these students for community college and a college experience, and getting them ready for that, what I call kind of a pre-professional setting. And so this is looking towards the entry of the school. Go to the next slide. This is basically looking back. So now we've walked into the school, looking back. That's that open stair I've talked about. So you could have someone either standing on the upper level. Maybe, Crystal wants to address a group of folks, or a teacher or a student wants to address a group of folks, deliver a speech or a presentation. They could stand there. Or on just the third step up, if there's some kind of an event, you wanted to arrange tables and have a words presentation or anything like that, the stairs can really be used for that. And I guess depending on what kind of, arts or activities the students here might, decide to be involved in themselves. This would be, a great place if you had a little group of students who are interested in improv, or, had your own little quartet or something. This would be a great place for them to just provide their own performance space without having to invest in one for the school, but let them share their skills with their fellow classmates.
Quick question, please, Alicia.
Yes.
This is Dr. Fitch.
Yes.
I see all the nice stairs and it's really beautiful, but is there an elevator? Is there some other access to the second story?
Yes, ma'am. Sort of right behind me, I would have just passed the elevator if I were walking into the school. So the elevator is right near the entrance to the school. If you wouldn't mind, Dr. Mills, going back a couple slides to the plan so I can orient folks to that. If you'll go right down to the little blue square across right there is our elevators, that square box, right
Okay.
here, it's right there.
Okay,
So right when we come in, just when we come in school, if we need to, we can go up the elevator. And that, if you'll go to the next slide, Dr. Mills,
Sure.
puts us in a pretty good proximity to a good number of the classrooms. So it's easily accessible and also observable from the front.
thank you very much.
That's a cool shot. You can see
Keep
the light
going.
coming into it. I love that one.
Yeah. Next one. And so this is, so we're basically, you get pretty well oriented in the center part of this school. So this is from the second floor, and this is looking down into that open space. You can also see down the end of the hallway there. So the other really great thing about this school is you probably need to have maybe 3 teachers on the second floor, and you can see any part of the school, which is something we really strive for in our plans. Then if you'll go to the next slide.
I think they put Crystal's picture or image in here. Is that what we're seeing? Crystal on the phone?
Oh.
Is she gonna fess up? She won't even answer.
Are those sound panels that are doubling as art on the walls? Since that's
Yes,
such an
ma'am.
open
On the
space?
walls, as well as what's hung from the ceiling, are acoustical treatments. Yes, so they do both. They look interesting and they're acoustic.
Thank you.
That's it.
No, I jumped the gun in asking you questions, so.
Oh, that's all right. We always put this slide at the end.
Members of the board, do any of you have any questions at this point in time? I think you've done an outstanding job. I like this particular shot where it's using the WATT acronym that you can see on top of the canopy. Not only is it WATT spelled out on the face of the building, but you've put that WATT symbol on the canopy and it stands out, and that looks. And I know that this is just a rendering, but it looks absolutely gorgeous.
Well, thank you.
Members of the board?
Madam Chair, I just have a comment.
Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Powell?
I'm anxious really to actually see the finished product. This is exciting and it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous because I don't live too far from this area, so I'll be excited about seeing that at the back of my house. So that's wonderful.
All right. Silence means consent, so I'm sure that that means that the rest of the board is pleased and ecstatic about what's going on in the prospects. So we thank you so very much for the progress. We look forward to groundbreaking. We look forward to that first dig into the earth by the earth moving machines and whatever, so that we can really say that this is getting off the ground. So thank you so very much.
We may have more information about the unofficial groundbreaking later this spring. I think that, from an administration standpoint, the folks at Skinner, Farlow, and Kerwin and Barnhill have been awesome to work with. It's been a good process. And the county manager and folks have rotated through, and some folks in the community college, and we've been coordinating, Mr. Letchworth and his staff have been coordinating with some of the work the community college is doing as well. So there's a lot of moving parts, but there's a lot of people who have a local interest in this, and it's really paying off. I don't know if Ms. Cox would finally talk and say anything. I know she's very excited about it as well, but it is nice to see the building in a real rendering that's very similar to what we're going to have at this point, and see it come to fruition. And it's going to go pretty fast once we start, and there's plenty to do, but I think it's really going to stand out and fit well within the community college's campus and design as well. But for our community, this is really going to be a nice addition.
That would be my comment, Dr. Mills. It really will enhance, this is Velma Barnes, the east side of Wilson, and that corner really has come to light with the remodeling and rebuilding of McDonald's, and I hope other businesses will come, because the Tiger Grant has really done a great job of cleaning up 301, repaving, putting different lightings, and it's really going to enhance East Wilson.
It's been a fun process. As much as you can say some things you have to figure out to do are fun, it is, it's a lot to learn and go through, having never done it before, but I've been very impressed with the folks we've been working with and the help they provided in the product that we're putting together. I think it's going to be really something that will serve for a long time.
All right. Thank you very much, and we're happy to have you come before us at any point in time with updates. So thank you again, Mr. Farlow, Ms. Alicia, John, Ms. Cox. Did you want to stay silent tonight or this afternoon?
I will say this, Madam Chair and Board, you know I am so excited. Thinking back to the inception of this school and having the support from all of you all of these years, you know, my heart is overjoyed for our students, for our staff, but also for our community. As someone who is a Wilson County Schools graduate, you know, it's exciting to see us add another school that our students can have such experiences. And I do feel like because of the support of our county commissioners and again, all of you, our kids are gonna have some hands-on experiences like they've never seen before. So thank you to all of you, and also to the architectural firm as well as Barnhill for the support that they've given us thus far.
All right. Thank you so very much. If there's nothing else, then we're going to thank you for your time with us, and we're going to move on with our agenda. And we're going to move into our action items, and we have several action items that we will be dealing with in a very few minutes. So we'll get on with item A, the athletic projects and track renovations at Bedingfield and Hunt High Schools. Dr. Mills?
Board members, I've put this on as an action item because I think what we need again is guidance and with direction for where we're headed. I've got Eric from CPO Architects is on the call as well. I'm trying to get down to the part on our agenda.
Go back, go down.
Yeah, go on.
Okay.
Okay, let me see my other screen. I can share kind of where we were. I can share where we were last with the process, and you know, just as an overview, we've had discussion about the tracks, and we've had discussion about other projects. We have done the paving at Bedingfield. We have agreed about the lights at Fikes Baseball Field, and we still have outstanding to decide about the tennis courts at Hunt and then the tracks projects themselves. So I would like to have your discussion about where we're headed to next. I have got, again, the details, if we want to go into those, about some of the cost pieces. And also, again, the architects are here to answer any questions. Let me pull that document up. It's the same one.
Have we had any feedback from the county commissioners?
I talked with the county manager and shared kind of where we were, and I think the discussion still comes down to what is it the board wants to do, and I cannot speak for the board. I did share there was several different projects we could go into with the tracks themselves, as well as the tennis courts were still something we consider to be a priority. I think at this point what we need to know is exactly what it is the board wants to do. You've had discussion about 6 lanes versus 8 lanes. You've had 6 lanes on in the record. And then we've also talked about some of the other projects, and, you know, again, we've gotten the paving done at Bettyfield, and we're just kind of there. So I think that the support is for what the board wants to do within reason, and I just think we need to come up with what that is. I feel like I'm at a bit of a loss.
Mrs.
Madam Chair.
I heard Mrs. Barnes first, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Mercer.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. My comment would be, at a prior meeting, I voted for 6 tracks. If the county commissioners had given us money, we would go with the 8 tracks. And I just want to say that when we first took the tour of the high schools a couple of years ago, which seems like forever, with the county commissioners, and we saw the conditions of the track and fields at Bettyfield and Hunt, I was really surprised at the conditions and knew that they were in great need of repair or replacements. And then we went over to Bettyfield, and the seats at Bettyfield in the auditorium, we looked at those and they needed to be replaced. And then we went over to Fike, and when going into one of the science rooms, it had equipment that had been there since the building of the school, according to our former board member, Gary Farmer, and it was yet another need. And when we were leaving the building, I remember discussing the building not having a vestibule or a safety area before just walking into the building, which is a safety concern and another capital need. And I also spoke with Mr. Letchford prior to this meeting, and he said that there are 12 facilities still in need of vestibules, which could potentially be at risk. And Fike is still one of those since we visited. And here we are today trying to make a final decision and dealing with whether or not we need the 8 tracks or the 6 lanes at Fike and Bettyfield. And I say all that just to make a point that we do have a lot of capital needs. And I won't forget, one of the commissioners that visited with us following our tour said that she couldn't wait to get to the other schools, particularly the elementary, because the tour was eye-opening and could allow our commissioners to see firsthand our other capital needs. So it's time for us to make a decision and not solely rely on what the county commissioners would give us in addition and their input. So when making my vote, I want it to be in consideration of the many capital needs that Wilson County Schools has. And of course, there are many. And as Mr. Breen said, we've been kicking this can down the road for quite a while, and it really is time for us to make a firm decision. And that would be my comments.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Barnes. Mr. Mercer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to start out by acknowledging the commissioners and the work they've done, the contributions, and it's just been the best relationship that we've had between school board and county commissioners in many years. And they care about the youth of Wilson, and they've been as generous as I think as they could be with our capital needs. But I too agree it's time to put to rest the 6 or 8 lanes idea, and because my thoughts are kind of way back. I think it might have been May of last year, 6 months, 9 months, whatever. We voted to do the 6 lanes, and almost within a day or so, we had some feedback that if we wanted to do it right, go ahead and let them know what it would cost, and it appeared that the doing it right would be 8 lanes instead of 6 lanes. But after a lot of discussion and input from people, it appears that 8 lanes are not necessary, and 6 lanes would serve our purpose without restrictions regarding track meets. It also appears that the idea of 8 lanes was preferred by some, and I understand that. It would be great if we could afford to do that. But I have my questions about, would it be wise use of money? I've talked to numerous people, because this has gone a long time. You've got plenty of time to talk with people. That's included parents, teachers,
coaches, both current and past, parents that are teachers, and others, and none of these have expressed a lot of support, if any support at all, for 8 lanes. Most voiced an opinion that we should be spending our time and resources on pressing and more important issues, and like certainly the pandemic and those issues. Many suggest that we spend our resources on needs and not wants. And I understand that, and I agree with that. We need to be making sure we can manage our needs. Now, to me, to host a track meet, we need proper facilities and equipment, the hurdles, the timing, the electronic timing devices, and maybe some other things. We also, to have a track meet, we need personnel willing and able to plan and manage the meet. This is not a small task and takes commitment. And I speak to that because having track meets is something that is important to the school. So, a major thought to me is we need to manage our resources to meet the needs of our schools. Wants are understandable, but we need to be responsible stewards of our resources and avoid the temptations of our wants. Currently, the 10-year capital plan we have, years 1 through 5 amounts to about $86+ million, which includes the Watt product in that 86. And in the 6 to 10 year amounts to about $43.5 million. It's highly unlikely that all those resources will be available, which calls to mind we need to prioritize the projects to pursue. We should make every dollar count, meet the needs of students, and pursue our mission to provide the best opportunities we can. All areas and grade levels should be cared for based on their needs. The same expenditures are not necessary at each school. Spending or meeting a need at one school shouldn't create a need to match it with some money at another school if the need does not exist. I see a need to provide 6 lane tracks at Bedingfield and Hunt, meet the ADA regulations that have been discussed at Bedingfield and Hunt, repair the tennis courts at Hunt, provide enough the other equipment that's needed to have meets and for any of the schools. Not necessarily now, but in the near future, I think we need to provide bathroom and locker room facilities at Bedingfield and Fife. An athletic complex is not complete without proper bathrooms and locker room facilities for visitors and home teams. To provide these things without the field houses at Bedingfield and Fife, we need the following. We need to use the $1.3 million remaining and request or be granted an additional $900,000 to $1 million. To go for 8 lanes, it would probably, and best I can tell, an additional $1 million on top of that. If we go beyond our needs, we're denying others at the expense of our wants. So with those things said, Madam Chair, I'd like to move that the Wilson County Board of Education honor the previous decision to provide new 6-lane tracks at Bedingfield and Hunt. And in addition, I move that we approve the following. Upgrades to meet ADA requirements at Bedingfield and Hunt, purchase of hurdles, purchase of an electronic timing equipment for track events, other track equipment necessary to support track meets and events, resurface and repair the tennis courts at Hunt High School. I further move we ask the superintendent to communicate with the county commissioners to confirm that the necessary funding would be available for these things. And that's my motion.
I need you to state that one other time for me, please, Mr. Mercer.
The motion,
Yes, sir.
okay,
Because I can't repeat that motion because I don't have it all. So I need you to repeat,
okay.
please.
I'll be glad to. I move the Wilson County Board of Education honor the previous decision to provide new 6-lane tracks at Bedingfield and Hunt. And in addition, I move we approve the following: upgrades to meet ADA requirements at Bedingfield and Hunt, purchase of hurdles, purchase of an electronic timing devices for track events, other track equipment necessary to support track meets and events, resurface and or repair the tennis courts at Hunt High School. And I further move we ask the superintendent to communicate with the county commissioners to confirm that the necessary funds are available.
I will second that.
Mr. Mercer, let's see if I got the essence of this motion, please.
Yes, ma'am.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mrs. Barnes, that the Wilson County Board of Education honor the previous decision for 6-lane tracks at Bedingfield and Hunt High Schools, and further ask that we upgrade the ADA changes that are necessary to be in compliance, that we provide the necessary equipment, including hurdles and timing devices and other equipment as necessary, that we resurface/repair the tennis courts at Hunt, and confer with the county to ensure that the necessary funds are available. Is that, sir, the essence of what your motion was?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Members of the board, is there any discussion? Hearing none, please respond with your vote. Mr. Mercer. Mrs. Powell.
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes.
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette.
Nay.
Mr. Boykin.
No.
Mr. Breen.
We talked about, and I know this is just for voting, but I feel like I'm gonna give a little exposition before I vote. You know, I talked last meeting about kicking the can and making a decision and how we shouldn't do that. We've continued this off the calendar previously, in order for there to be discussions, and folks to report back on those discussions and whether or not the county commissioners were gonna, you know, give that $2 million. I think I was loud and adamant at the previous meeting as to whether or not they were gonna give us that money. But I also have to counterbalance the need to go ahead and start these projects so as not to continue to prejudice not only our track and field athletes, but also our other athletes and other students that utilize those facilities. So I'm going to vote aye at this point.
All right. Myself, Dr. Fitch, I vote aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries 5-2 with Mrs. Boyette and Mr. Boykin casting the dissenting votes. All right. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, the 2020-2021 budget amendments. Dr. Mills, or is that going to be Dr. Williams?
That'll be Mr. Stanley.
Mr. Stanley, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
He would like for it to be Dr. Williams, but it's Mr. Stanley.
Mr. Stanley, you have the floor.
First one is the state. And, we received an additional $87,862, and, that came up, two primary areas. One was, coding in a mobile grant initiative. That was the initial allotment of $77,000. That money is being budgeted for workshops and stipends and supplies. Back in Dr. Mills' comments, I believe the last board meeting, he mentioned the specific grant we received. We also received $6,142 for the November, December substitute pay, and an additional $2,576 in the November technology for November, December interest.
All right. Members of the board, any question in regard to Budget Amendment 105, the State Public School Fund? Hearing none, Mr. Stanley, if you want to move on to budget item 303.
The main thing here is we're just moving money between the 5,000 codes and 6,000 codes and 7,000 codes to align the budget with expenditures that have taken place or expected to take place throughout the fiscal year.
All right, this is the federal fund. Any questions? All right, Mr. Stanley, if you want to move to Amendment 404 from the Capital Outlay Fund.
That first one, that $3,188 is some insurance proceeds from a vehicle that was a driver vehicle that was damaged. And it's got to get repaired. It may have already been repaired, but this is getting the money in the budget so we can get it paid for. And the $600,000 is for 5 yellow buses. Doesn't cost us anything. The state is replacing these buses, so they are replacing buses, but we have to show it in our general ledger and get it budgeted, and that's what the purpose of that amount is.
All right, members of the board, any questions in regard to the Capital Outlay Fund?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyette?
5 yellow buses that we will be replacing, what do we do? Or can we sell and keep the profits from those? And if so, what is the estimated profit?
What was the question?
The question,
The buses that are being replaced, the $600,000 that replaces the 5 yellow buses. What do we do with the 5 yellow buses that are replaced? Can we sell them? And if so, what is the estimated profit?
Right now, and this is probably, right now they help me use this as backup buses. I don't know how old those buses are, and when we go to sell them, I believe, and Dr. Williams, you can respond if you need to, but I believe we got to have permission from the Department of Construction, so.
do we not usually look at those that we rotate out when we get new ones in? Look at the mileage and everything else that's on whatever else is in the fleet, and then proceed from there to use the best of those remaining buses to kind of double as activity buses or as backup buses for, and getting rid of the older ones in the fleet that we may have?
You've asked a question, Dr. Fitch, I'm not sure I can really answer. That's more probably a director of transportation question. That probably would be for me, but my understanding is, yes, you are correct. Once buses reach a certain mileage, they are taken out of service.
But I think
when it comes to selling buses, I don't have much experience in selling them, but normally some of these older buses are used for backup buses. When they do get sold, I believe we have to have permission from the Department of Construction to sell them.
I have a question as well, Madam Chair.
Wait a minute, Ms. Barnes, I think Mrs. Boyette may have had a follow-up in regard to that.
one of the things that prompted my question was that, you know, farmers often like those buses, and I had heard farmers express their difficulty with trying to buy from Wilson County and expressing that it was much easier to go to other counties and get their buses, and that's what prompted my question.
I can find out. I think this might be the first batch that we've had since, well, if we haven't, I don't remember, but the first batch since I've been here where we sold them off. I do believe we have to get permission to sell them off, but they do leave the fleet, and then they come off that way. So, and I don't have a good metric of what the cost or the sales price may be, but let me find out and follow back up with everybody, because I do see them around too, and I wasn't aware of that, but I would much rather have the revenue stay in.
Right here in
and see
Wilson
ours.
County.
I don't have much experience with it, because it is, quite honestly, it's a very rare event to have them come out of the fleet because they go so much longer now than they used to. But as we've been replacing activity buses, we've still got some of those and get good at those. But let me find out about the yellow buses and do that, Ms. Boyette, and I'll let everyone know, because I would want to help our local folks to be able to access those. But I do know they come out of the fleet and we have to get permission.
All right. Any other questions in regard to that particular budget amendment?
Not a question.
I'm sorry, Ms. Barnes, yes.
Not a question for Mr. Stan, I'm sure you can answer. But I've seen those buses when they've been taken out of service from other counties, and with the names still left on them, they're awful looking. There's one in my neighbor, somewhere up street from me, on the highway that has one that I thought was Wilson County Schools, but evidently not. And it is awful looking. So if we do sell them, hopefully we can get the names taken off of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen it had that too, and in a former place, I heard about one that had a rust-covered top every time, and it wasn't part of the fleet anymore. So I'm definitely going to have the name scrubbed off of it and painted over, because that is misleading to the public when you see some of those buses that old out and about, and it still has school system's name on it. So I understand completely, Ms. Barnes.
All right. Any other comments in regard to Budget Amendment 404, capital outlay? Hearing none, we're going to move to Budget Amendment 805, Local Special Revenue Fund. Mr. Stanley?
On the first one, we got our sales tax money, $115,960. We also got $2,000 from Wells Fargo, our substance prevention program, additional $2,500. Medicaid outreach program, we have received so far $44,496. We're getting out in the budget figures for these three. Indirect cost, that's projected what I think we'll get for the rest of the year. I mean, for the entire year, starting from last July. We have received some of it, but I'm just projecting out what it will be for the rest of the year. We've received $14,095 in driver's ed fees, which is being put in the driver's ed program. That dependent care medical reimbursement, that is, again, projecting out for this school year what we will receive and pay out in that fund as well. The more at four, that $68,000 is what we have received for the last 2 months for the more at four program.
Are there any questions in regard to Budget Amendment 805 from the Local Special Revenue Fund?
This is just a comment, and it's a compliment for, this is Ms. Barnes, a compliment for Mr. Stanley. I love this format that you're using. Probably ask more questions than I ever have because it's so easy to read. Because I had no idea our income was as great for driver's ed as we receive, which is good to know.
Any other questions or comments? Members of the board, the chair will entertain a motion in regard to the budget amendments as presented.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer?
I move that the board approve budget number 105, State Public School Fund, budget number 303, Federal Fund, budget 404, Capital Outlay Fund, and budget amendment 805, Local Special Revenue Fund, is recommended by administration.
Second.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mr. Breen, that we approve the 2020-2021 budget amendments as recommended by the administration for Amendment 105, the State Public School Fund, 303, the Federal Fund, 404, the Capital Outlay Fund, 805, the Local Special Revenue Fund. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Item C, 2020-2021 contract for the annual financial audit. Is that going to be you, Dr. Mills, or is that going to be Mr. Stanley, or?
That's all three of us, but definitely, it's time for us to, sign on the contract for our audit, our financial audit, annual process. This has been reviewed, and, we have a budget down there. I would ask Mr. Stanley if you want to offer anything, for this, any information. It's very straightforward.
Mr. Stanley?
It's a good firm that does the audit. They're a very good firm. They got over 40-some school systems, so they know what they're doing. They're a very good firm.
All right. I did have one quick question in regard to the proposed budget for them. And in your précis, it says the proposed budget is $44,500. Fees may be charged if additional work is required by another agency regarding another program or COVID funds. Can you explain that a little bit when you say if additional work is required by another agency?
If, for example, the Department of Public Instruction or the Office of State Budget Management on the COVID funds would require additional work than what they may be getting guidance on, then the fee might go up a little bit. The partner I talked to told me it might be no more than 5 or 10 hours, so you're probably looking at maybe $1,000 or less dollars.
Okay. In the normal process of the audit, do we usually have other agencies or programs that we have to have consideration of?
Usually not, Dr. Fitch, but because we're in the pandemic that we're in, and you've got so many agencies that are involved in all the money we've been getting, they don't know what the requirements might be from other agencies.
Okay, okay. So that we are taking this at the proposed amount given, but allowing for the flexibility of other agencies and programs if necessary. Is that correct?
It would be mine.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Members of the board, you have the recommendation from the administration in regard to the annual financial audit. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
I heard Mr. Breen first.
Oh, let Ms. Powell go.
Ms. Powell, Mr. Breen is yielding to you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Brady. I move that we approve the contract for the annual financial audit.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by Mr. Breen, that we approve the administration's recommendation for the 2020-2021 contract for the annual financial audit. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please record your response. Mr. Mercer? Mr. Mercer? Thank you. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykins?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Item D, the 2021-2022 calendar for budget development. Dr. Mills?
Madam Chair, board members, it's time for us, unbelievably so, to start thinking about preparing the work session dates and budget documents to take to the county. We've provided you a tentative budget calendar, very similar to the same process as last year. And if you look, May 4th is when we're headed to County Commissioners meeting to present our budget, so backdating that. So we're looking to get your approval to think about a March 29th work session to go through the budget, and then gives us some time to make any changes and again bring back to the board and have a vote before we go to the commissioners. The same general time frame as last year.
All right, this is pretty much the basic calendar that we follow from year to year in the process of the budget development for the system. Members of the board, this is a discussion and an action item. Do you have any questions, comments? What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Breen?
I move that we adopt the 2021-2022 calendar for budget development.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Breen and seconded by Mr. Mercer that we approve the 2021-2022 budget calendar for development as presented by the administration. Is there any further discussion?
Madam Chair, I will not be able to be present on the 29th of March.
All right. So noted. All right. Please record your vote. Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Nay.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries 6-1 with Mrs. Boyette being in opposition to the motion. Item F, proficiency. No, I'm sorry, did I? Item D, E. Item E, the proposed 2021-2022 traditional calendar. You know, we have approved so many calendars that it's always very interesting when another one comes before us. So, Dr. Wilson, I believe this is you.
Yes, ma'am. You had in your board packet 2 calendars. And we are presenting 2 calendars to you today. The first one, if you'll notice up at the top, says based on legislation requirements for the 2021 school year. Or, excuse me, the first one is based on the current calendar law, General Statute 115-84.2. And the second one is about the General Assembly's requirements for the 2021 school year. And the reason that we have added both of these is because we wanted to make sure that families understood that there could be a possibility that the beginning of the school year and the ending of the school year could change. We did survey our stakeholders. We sent out a survey from January the 5th through the January 14th. And based on that feedback from the calendar that was shared with them, we did make a few changes, such as In the January date on the first calendar, as well as the second calendar, you'll see January 3rd and 4th as mandatory work days. The one that was shared with our stakeholders earlier did not have that. And so we did add that in to help with the transition between the first semester and second semester. And then we also moved the October the 18th and the March 14th optional work days to be closer to the 9 weeks, the ending of the 9 weeks, to help with teachers. That was something that we heard from a previous board meeting to help them get ready for the report cards that would go out the following week. We had 456 surveys that were completed to help us provide input and just as many comments on what worked and what did not work. When you look at the two calendars side by side, you'll notice that the September through the May calendars months are all the same. So September through May are identical. The dates that are different would be your August and your June on both of the calendars. So when you look at the second one, or the one that is based on the legislation requirements, you'll see that August the 16th through the 20th happens to be with a little asterisk. That way, if for some reason the General Assembly did come back, as they did this past year, and say we needed to add additional days on the calendar, then families could plan for that. That was one of the things that we heard from them, is that this was all very short timing. If we had known that this was the way it was going to be. So we put a contingency here that if the General Assembly does come back with 5 additional days, those would be the days. And when you change the starting date of a calendar, that also changes the ending date, which is in June. And so you can see to where the last day of the school year on the first calendar for our current school year would be June 3rd. And then on the one with the legislative requirements for 2021 would be June 1st. You also will notice at the bottom of the calendar, the bottom right-hand part, it'll tell you the number of total days. And we have to stick within the 215 days. We've also had the finance department to review this calendar as well. So no matter what lies ahead, we wanted to also make sure that we continue to refine our remote learning. So you'll notice that the remote learning days are in both of the calendars, whether it's for inclement weather, whatever things that would happen. We put 3 in the first semester and 2 in the second semester, because we do have another set of classes that come into play when we're at the high school level.
You've given us 2 calendars, one based on current and one based on proposed, I guess. How do we best make a decision when, if the legislature changes, we're going to have to come back anyway? Are we better off with one of these options you're providing us than the other?
Yes, ma'am. My recommendation would be to vote on the one that says based on the current calendar law, General Statute 115-84.2. I would say we vote on that, but I wanted the general public and our educators to be aware of what the 5 additional days would look like at the beginning and the end, so that when they get ready to plan for vacations or they plan to go places, that they did not plan something to happen during the week of August the 16th through the 20th, or even that second week in June, or the first full week in June.
So basically the second one, which says based on legislation requirements for 2020, 2021, that's our what-if calendar.
Yes, ma'am.
But your recommendation is on the draft that says based on current calendar law. And that's our best option to go
Yes.
with, because when I looked at this and I'm going, these are so similar, why are we fighting this? And it was not a base recommendation. So you are saying that this first one is what is the first choice, and the other one is a what if and what might happen if we have to revise the calendar.
Correct. And to prepare people for what their things could change. Yes, ma'am.
So what are you looking to do with this second one if we do the recommendation that you are suggesting? Just put that aside and just bring it up later, but this is the forewarning that there may be some changes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's all I wanted to do, is just to give information ahead of time of how it could look in the month of August and June,
Okay.
if so things changed.
I'm going to ask the board members if they have any other questions in regard to these two calendars and the base recommendation that the system or the administration is making to us.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Mercer?
I was thinking that if we say, could we not say if the laws do not change, we'll do the ones that are currently under General Statutes 11584.2, and if they change the statutes or direction, that we would automatically go to the other one, because we're going to have to comply with the state regulations or the laws anyway.
Well, you know that if they make any changes, we'll be back here voting on the changes that have to be made anyway.
I mean, well, of course, I reckon it's a speculation on what their changes would be if they change it, or it may be, I mean, Dr. Wilson, how accurate do you think we are on what might happen?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball on that, but what I can certainly share with you my thinking. This is my thinking when I shared this with Dr. Mills, and my idea in presenting two calendars here was because we were out for one 9-week period. One 9-week period, and the General Assembly came back and said, you're going to add 5 days to the calendar. We have been in and out of school for almost an entire year. So in my head, in my thinking, is that there could be a possibility. If we were out 9 weeks, then what would it look like? Would they want us to add stick with that same practice? And I didn't want our families and our educators to feel like they already had things planned and they not know that that could be a possibility again.
Well, thank you. I was just thinking if we knew that was what had been proposed and it was a matter would it be approved or not approved, then I would feel good. I'd feel okay about saying, let's approve the one that's now, and also if they change to what is proposed, then we would already have the other one in place. But I'm fine with approving this one and coming back later. Either way is fine.
Are there other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Mercer.
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes, I think I'd be satisfied with approving the one based on the current calendar law, because it's difficult to try to predict. Dr. Wilson does a fantastic job, but I know it's difficult to predict what's going to happen with the legislature, because things change, as we know, obviously, at the drop of a dime. So I'm fine with just accepting the current calendar that we have here before us.
All right, if there are no other comments or questions, the chair will entertain a motion in regard to the adoption of a calendar for 2021-2022.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Breen,
I move that we adopt the 2021-2022 traditional calendar based on the current legislation.
Second.
it has been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that we approve the traditional calendar presented that is based on the current calendar law, General Statutes 142-84.2. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyette?
could I request that the second calendar also be attached in some way to our website as a contingency policy? Otherwise, I do not see the value in the effort that was put forth to develop it, because the general public will only, perhaps those that are watching and have memory of this meeting, would have any knowledge of that. So I think that it should be listed as an or on the website as an alternative calendar if things should change based on the
For informational purposes only.
Watermark it and do some other things that stand out.
I think for informational purposes and as an optional alternative, because I think if you list it strictly as an alternative, people will accept that if something happens to the traditional, this will be it, but there may be some other circumstances and contingencies that come into play that might keep this from being, but that this them see that is an option that may be available should there be some major change in the calendar that we have just adopted. So I'm hearing or seeing the head nods of Dr.
Yes,
Wilson.
I agree to that. Information qualified the right way should be, because I think Dr. Wilson had a good purpose in mind in preparing that.
Well, I see the head nods and the from Dr. Wilson and Dr.
that's no
Mills
problem. That's a
that
good
this can be put on the website in some way so as to make the public aware that there may be an option that is on the table for considerations. All right, thank you very much. Now we are at item F, Proficiency Summer School 2021. Dr. Wilson.
Yes, ma'am. We are looking forward to sharing lots of learning opportunities this summer with our students. There are 2 plans that we need to bring before you, one this month and one next month. This month is the Proficiency Summer School, or the Proficiency Summer Program. Next month, we will be bringing to you the Read to Achieve. And those 2 learning opportunities have happened for the past several years. So that's nothing new. The third option that we would like to bring later would be some learning opportunities based on using some of our CARES funding. And so we're in the process of working on that. We've already started planning, but we're not at the point to share that with the board at this time.
Okay.
We do have the Proficiency Summer Program to share. You have attached a one-sheet document that Mr. Sage has created. I do want to make sure that we know that under where it says eligibility, where on the 3rd bullet where it says EOC, North Carolina Math 1, Math 3, and Biology, we need to add English 2. Mr. Sage got word today from his contact in the RESA is that English 2 would be, because they had had enough scores in the semester 1 from the previous year to norm that. You will notice that EOGs for 3 through 5 in English Language Arts is not listed because there was no testing from last year to do the norming of that.
Okay.
So we do have another one to add. From the time this was printed to today, you will notice even in one of the documents that's attached to this Precies, that's on page 3, that's a letter from Dr. Stegall, is that on page 3, number 5, it does not list the English 2, but that's the most recent communication that we had at the time of the printing. So I'm sure there'll be additional information. And the other documents that are added there are identified in page 1 of that letter that talks about credit recovery. And that's the only reason that they're added, because they can show us what we need to know about the credit recovery. So we need board approval so that we can proceed with the dates that you see listed here and the times and our testing plan.
So the only thing that has changed is in regard to the eligibility, and under the third bullet, EOC North Carolina Math 1, Math 3, Biology, and now English 2.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now when you mentioned the 3-5 ELA, that still is not, okay, you
No.
just threw that out there and it.
I wanted to make sure that we did not receive anything about that. There were
Okay.
no tests given this past year
Okay,
in May.
all right, this is an action item. Members of the board, what is your pleasure in regard to the Proficiency Summer School 2021?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell,
I move that we approve the Proficiency Summer School 2021.
and that's now inclusive of the English 2, correct?
Yes,
Yes,
including
all right.
English 2.
All right?
I will second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by Mrs. Barnes, that we approve the Proficiency Summer School 2021 schedule and listing of courses as presented by the administration. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, let it be known. Mr. McPherson?
I was going to say, make sure you vote by board member. It sounded like you were about to do it by the yeas and nays.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Moved and seconded that we move forward with the recommendation for Proficiency Summer School 2021 as provided by the administration. There being no further discussion, please cast your vote. Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. I do have a question before we move to the next item. It's usually in the month of February that we get new, or January, that we have gotten any new course offerings. And in February, we put out the pre-registration material for the next school year. And I have not heard anything come forward in regard to pre-registration for next year. Are we on target and on track for doing that for next year? And the students usually get a brochure or booklet. Will those go out this year or not? Or how are we in regard to registration for the next academic year, please?
I'm going to let Mr. Linden talk about that because I know he's been working with the counselors.
All right. Mr. Linden, if you'll open your mic, please.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yes, ma'am, we are on track with that. This year, our high schools did not request any new courses to be offered into their slate. So we had none to bring to the board. The curriculum guide has been updated and it is currently posted. It is being shared on the Wilson County Schools website under secondary education. And also the counselors have posted it into their Google Classrooms. The counselors and the school administrators have developed plans to do their registrations in a virtual format this year, given the current situation. But they are making contact with students and beginning the registration process in the next 2 weeks, actually, is when it'll begin at the high schools. They start with the rising seniors because as They need to make sure that the course selections for those students are in place first, and then they work all the way down to where they're working with the rising ninth graders at the end of it.
Well, I'm going to go back to a concern that I have continued to have through the years. And yes, we are remote and most of our students, but that's such a huge document, and sometimes having that document in hand is better. And because we know that the connectivity is sometimes sketchy and spotty for some of our students, are we making any effort to make sure that there are some hard copy editions available for those persons who may be having some difficulties with connectivity, with the amount that it takes to have access to that pre-registration or to that informational device booklet that usually goes out with all the course offerings? Are we only going to put that on the website, and how are we handling that process, please?
I think that we can, in fact, I'm certain that we can have hard copies that are placed at each school, the council center, and advertise that any parents and students that need them will have access to them.
Because particularly since they are going to be going back into the schools, and some parents might say, can you bring one home? And I want to make sure that information is available in some other format other than just on our website.
I understand. Yes, ma'am.
So the actual pre-registration will occur tentatively from when to when then?
It begins the end of this month, so we're looking at the last, I believe it's the 28th or the 1st. It must be March 1st. It's 2 weeks from today.
So March 1st through when?
Well, it varies from school to school because of the number of students they're enrolling, but they hope to have everything finished by the second week of April.
Okay, so from March 1st to April, around April and I don't have a quick calendar, but they have at least a month to be able to get those registrations in.
Yes, ma'am. It's roughly a 6-week window.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
If we can make sure that we get those dates posted on the system website or do whatever so that families can know, it would be much appreciated. All right. Anything else? We are now at item G, revised policies. Members of the board, what is your pleasure in regard to the second reading? At the last board meeting, we looked at board policies. They were all first reads. The administration provided you the same information. This is second read. I think they have taken into account any necessary corrections and changes that the board requested and dealt with at the last meeting. What is your pleasure in regard to the policies?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Breen,
I move that the board approve the policies listed on the agenda under Roman numeral 7. Discussion action items, letter G, revised policies 1 through 13 as a second reading, and repeal corresponding old policies as set forth in the handout dated February 15th, 2021.
Second.
it's been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that the board approve the policies listed on the agenda under Roman numeral 7, discussion action items, letter G, revised policies 1 through 13 as a second reading, and repeal the corresponding old policies as set forth in the handout dated February 15, 2021. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please respond. Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell,
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette,
Aye.
Mr. Boykin,
Aye.
Mr. Breen,
Aye.
myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Members of the board, we are now at item 9, closed session. The chair will entertain a motion in regard to moving into closed session.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes,
I move that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321 to consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statutes 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 USC and the 1232G to establish or give instructions concerning the Board of Education's negotiating positions concerning a potential acquisition and or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5 and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3.
is there a second? It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by Mr. Breen, that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C through 319 through 321 to consider confidential student matters as provided in the North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statutes 115C 402 and the Family Educational and Privacy Act 20 United States Code 1232G to establish or give instructions concerning the Board of Education's negotiating position concerning a potential acquisition and or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5 and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen? Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We are now adjourned into closed session.